So I want to talk a little bit about sin and sin consciousness and struggling with sin. Basically, something I believed all my life was that it's normal for Christians to struggle with sin. And the fact that you were struggling with sin showed that, in fact, you were a Christian. Because people who just don't care, people who aren't Christian, they don't struggle with it. They just do what they want, and they don't have a moral conflict or, a battle in their minds. And so, all my life I've been like striving to do better, striving to perfect myself, and striving to overcome these character flaws and, and get over the sin that's entangled me, all these different things. And I just recently, through talking with other people and having really amazing eye-opening experiences, realized there's a perspective change that we need to have in order to really get the thing that's been missing all of our lives. And I feel like when I finally heard this a few days ago, everything just clicked, and everything made sense. And I was like, this is the key that I've been missing to stop struggling with sin. And basically, it comes down to perspective. So you can look at a glass, right? And you can either say it's half empty or it's half full. And technically that's the same thing. It's just, someone can call it nuance. Oh, we're just playing word games or semantics, right? It's basically describing the same thing. And yes, that's true. It is describing the same thing, but it's super different. And it's very different in how you apply it and what it does to you and how it makes you live your life. If I call a bottle half empty, and you're focusing on the empty part, and it's your mindset that's going to control your attitude and your story. Versus if you say it's half full, you're focusing on the part that's full, and you're living from that, a place of abundance. And it's the same thing with ourselves. If we choose to look at ourselves as sinners, or if we choose to look at ourselves as righteous. And technically, those both are simultaneously true. Yes, we live on earth, and do we sin? Yes, we do sin. But at the same time, Christ has died for us. Christ has called us righteous, holy, and blameless. He has given us his robe of righteousness. So we're also righteous. And so those two things might sound contradictory, like half full, half empty, sinner, righteous, but it's really just a matter of perspective. And it really affects, and it really, determines on how you're going to live. Now it kind of frustrates me when people say, oh, well, we're just sinners, or we're all on a journey, or, we'll get better in time, or this is something I'm struggling with and God's working on me, as an excuse to stay exactly where they are and make no progress whatsoever. And that all sounds good, but the sin consciousness mentality where you just label yourself as a sinner and accept that as your identity, basically you're viewing it as, well, we're all sinners, we have this sinful fallen nature, and so sin is inevitable, right? It's kind of like this defeatist mentality versus where you say, no, Christ has died for me, he has given me a new nature, that old man, that old flesh is cast away. You're walking in victory versus choosing to look at your defeat. And I just want to read some things from Ephesians 4 to kind of just drive home my point here. It starts, the little title for this section is called Instructions for Christian Living. So if you're a Christian and you're living, which I hope you are if you're watching this video, these are instructions for you to live here while on earth. So it says, so I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, or people that don't believe in God, or people without God, atheists, whatever, people who don't acknowledge God in their lives. You must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. And I underlined that, the futility of their thinking, because it's really, again, it's all about the mind. It's literally all about what you believe. What you believe will determine how you act. It's just so powerful. I think of the verse that says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What you believe determines how you will act and what you'll do, which is why, sorry, I'm diverging from the text here for a second, which is why when the disciples failed and when they messed up, Christ talked about their lack of faith. It was all what they believed. So anyways, okay, sorry, I was in verse 17 of chapter 4, in case you want to look it up later. Ephesians 4, chapter 17, reading through. I'm now in 18. They are darkened in their understanding. Their brains. Okay. And separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Verse 19, having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. And I really love that there. It says that it's all because of the ignorance and the darkened understanding that they've given themselves over. And when I think of the wording given themselves over, it kind of just sounds like, well, I give up. It's like a surrender. It's like, and how many times have I, like throughout my life, like sins that I've struggled with or like felt that had, you know, enslaved me or that I just, you know, wasn't strong enough to overcome, I've just given myself up. I was like, you know what, God, I'm not strong enough. You're going to have to, only you can save me from this. Only you're strong enough to change my heart. And you kind of like remove your own sense of responsibility here. You know, you just kind of like be like, well, it's God's, your timing. I know you're doing a work in me, all that. That kind of vernacular, it just sounds defeatist, which is, again, the mentality, half empty. Sinner, I am a sinner. You embrace that, that's how you're going to act. If you believe you're a sinner, you're going to act like one. If you call yourself a sinner, if you think sin is inevitable, that's probably what's going to end up happening. Anyways, where are we at? Okay, verse 20. That, however, is not the way of life you learned when you heard about Christ, and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. And what is the truth that is in Jesus? He came and died so that we could be righteous. He now sees us as pure, righteous, holy, blameless, without blemish, and free from accusation. That's in Colossians chapter 1. And Christ literally took our old flesh and gave us his spirit. So it's a trade. You know, a transaction occurred. Old flesh, here. Sinful nature, take it. Now I'm taking on Christ's nature and his righteousness. So that's who I really am. That's my real identity. Am I still able to sin? Yes, it's still possible for me to sin. It's always possible for you to do something outside of your identity. Always. Like, a princess can go act like a peasant if she wants. Aladdin, look at Jasmine. She was walking in the marketplace, acting like a peasant, dressing like a peasant, eating food like a peasant, and people thought she was a peasant. But was she a peasant, though? No, she wasn't. That did not change her identity. She was still a princess. So we can act, you know, all crazy if we want to, and we can still sin, but that does not change that we are no longer considered sinners. We are viewed as righteous. And if we have that mentality that we are righteous, it gives us confidence, and it gives us authority to look at sin in the face and be like, you don't own me. Back up, Satan. Absolutely not. Like, that's the kind of mentality change that is super important. Okay, moving on. Okay, well, I think we are in, verse 22. You were taught with regard to your former way of life. It's no longer your way of life now. That's the New Living Grace translation. To put off your old self. Old self. It is no longer your current self. The sinful nature is not your current nature, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. To be made new in the attitude of your minds. I underlined that because this is exactly what I'm saying. To be made new in the attitude of your minds. It's all about what you think. And to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Boom. Case closed.